Morning, gang, or good afternoon as it is. 80 years since the Battle of Britain and all that. And I was reading today as I was doing my Twitter/Facebook update status things. I don't understand how social media works. Apparently on Twitter you can't edit your posts, not that I can see anyway. So I look totally dim-witted. No change there. But today, though not any great shakes in a way, it was incredibly dramatic and changed Admiralty policy which on Channel convoys, which up until then it was a case of sailing them down the Channel even after France fell, meaning that of course that the Channel coast all the way out to Cherbourg and the Channel Islands had free reign on what were of course British convoys by and large. Now according to a couple of sources, so you have to forgive me, I'm not going to read it off the screen, but I like to have a little bit of reassurance. The weather today, fine day with haze in the Straits of Dover. Indeed, July 1940 was apparently an exceptionally warm month for the time of the 20th century. Contrast that today, July 25th, 80 years later, and it's been a steady torrential downpour for much of the afternoon and since about midday really, which means my bird feeder's knackered. But then pigeons aren't too fussy, are they? But today it was, as I say, fairly dramatic. According to the Battle of Britain webpage, there was effectively enemy action and aerial activity from around midday, probably earlier, and certainly the Germans were still mine laying and anywhere from the 4th or 3rd, yeah, all the way down to Dover. Now, just after midday, around about 20 Hurricanes engaged 40 Messerschmitt 109s, and there was a bit of a set to, as you might well imagine. You can only indeed imagine what that must have been to watch from, say, Dover. Dogfights were far different already than what they had been in the last war, barely 20 years previous. It was entirely possible for a pilot to be engaged in the dogfight, and then next thing you know, he's been left behind or he's elsewhere and no one else seems to be around. Conversely, it was entirely possible for one person to be set upon by several others. I think it's in my Forgotten Voices of the Battle of Britain and the Blitz book. There was some light instructor before the battle took hold there, saying about you do X, Y and Z in certain situations, and the pilot stuck his hand up and said, well, so what happens if you get attacked by more than one fighter? And the instructor says something along the lines of, well, that won't happen. And according to the fellow relating the story, the pilot who asked the question was last seen being chased around a church spire by 3 Messerschmitt 109s, and I assume with that kind of statement the poor swine was killed. But a convoy is passing through the Channel, and it seems to have spent all of the July 25th from midday under attack by the enemy. It seemed to be mostly a coal-based convoy in terms of what it was carrying, and it has the delightful codename Peewit. Somebody in the Admiralty must have had a rather peculiar sense of humour. You know, you can only imagine in the Citadel, which you see in Sink to Bismarck, the plot moving bits and pieces around on the map, and the wrens and ratings doing that thing on the wall. Peewit, and it's like, well, whoever thought of that? Needless to say, if I may refer to it. '54 Squadron scrambled but got bounced by some Messerschmitts, and that was around about 1:45 in the afternoon. And then almost an hour and a half later, the enemy comes back in force. 30 Junkers 88 supported by over 50 Messerschmitt 109s. Again, can you imagine what that must have been to see, and indeed from the convoy? Poor chaps who are not really Navy men. And I think they were, from the sounds of it, they were escorted by at least 2 destroyers, Boreas and Brilliant, or Burrows, or whatever you want to call it. and the enemy probably looked down at this and think, well, this is fair game. Now at the start of the canal conf, the enemy didn't know how to hit the far side of a barn, and much like they did at Dunkirk, they gradually honed their skills. Even then, it wasn't like shooting fish in a barrel, to use your expression. On this occasion, though, it gradually turned into that. Despite the fact they were countered by Spitfires and Hurricanes, the enemy go in, drop some bombs, but get driven off. And you think that's it now? The convoy's been attacked twice within an hour and a half, and the Germans, for reasons best known to themselves, wait until about 5:15, it says here. And indeed, by this point, the convoy now is up through the Straits and is near Folkestone. Well, ultimately 11 out of the 21 vessels of the convoy are sunk, and the Germans have lost 19 aircraft to the loss of 9 British aircraft. They've lost 19 men to the British 7. By now, July 25th, you're about 15 days into what we now call the Battle of Britain. German losses in terms of aircraft and men exceed that of the British. Indeed, there's been one day where the British lost a aircraft but no man. Chap bailed out. Whereas the enemy, of course, are flying bombers by and large that have crew of more than one person to them. I think a Heinkel 111 carried about 6 people, I think it was. Either way, you shoot down 3 bombers and say their crew don't either survive or bail out over Britain. You've lost a couple dozen men, virtually. Whereas, as I've said before, a British aircraft crashing down over Britain, the pilot, if he's well, not too far from his airfield, can be back in a fresh aircraft for the afternoon. A great physical exertion to himself. The loss of virtually half of this convoy prompts the Admiralty to change their procedure so that convoys sail at night. But very soon, we're about a week or so, well, just 2 weeks away from the Battle of Britain entering a new phase. So convoys are all round dandy, but I'm not entirely clear on what U-boats are doing at this particular juncture. E-boats were involved in the battle, obviously on the water, but had Hitler used his noggin, I would have thought the Channel would have been quite a good place to launch U-boats into, but like I say, the Germans have been mine laying, the British have been mine laying, and the German part is to hinder British shipping, but also for channel lanes during invasion, and the British obviously to stop invasion and all the rest of it. So the Battle of Britain is continuing. There's no real let up, and I thought it's on my laptop. It's not ending anytime soon. So that is your... I had better ideas for this video, but it seems that when I do videos I don't always trust myself to tell the story and the facts without referring to them. So I apologise, and also it's been raining, as I say, so we'll see if there will be any more videos coming shortly.